I wanted to just start by asking you about the, the genesis of this book. What inspired you to...
I think, like, a little bit I sort of feel like, like the Three Stooges Meet Samson, like, movie, you know what I mean? And all of a sudden Shemp Howard is being asked to appear on Fresh Air and is interviewed by Terry Gross about, like, his religious upbringing and stuff like that, you know what I mean? What went into this Three Stooges? I mean, essentially, like, I wanted it to be funny, but in a way it was like coming back to the stories that I originally, like, pondered as a kid, and it was sort of like a chance to wrestle out their moral truths, I guess. They had, like, these were the first stories that I ever heard before, like, even TV or movies or anything. So it was sort of like a way of, like, reconnecting with old friends, you know, and yeah.
And what were your, growing up, what were your favorite stories, and when you sat down to write this book, were they still your favorite, or did that change?
A little bit, like, for one thing, I mean, I didn't write about it here, but, Samson just seemed so cool, like, that it was this, you know, like, a lot of the Jewish people I knew were, like, I don't know, bookish and stuff like that, and here was, like, this long-haired, behemoth, that was kind of exciting, but in rereading it again, like, I sort of saw more subtle, kind of, like, you know, like King David's friend Jonathan, who abdicated the throne so like David could take over. I mean, that seemed decent, and decency maybe would have, you know, not seemed like such a heroic quality to me as a kid, but sort of resonated with me as an adult. But for the most part, like, when I started writing it, I felt like, okay, you know, when you're writing an historical document such as this, like, the scholarly adult thing to do is to do research. So I went and I started reading the Bible stories, and I read a lot of them. And also what I was actually very surprised by was just how compacted they were. Like the story of the Tower of Babel, or the story of the Noah and the Ark, like, they're really short. Like the Tower of Babel is like a sentence, you know, and so much of it is like in the unpacking and the exegesis, and that was very surprising. But what I found was just that the story, even though I read all these new stories, the ones that I came back to were the ones that I had learned in, you know, like free Hebrew classes, bar mitzvah lessons, and the kind of crazy versions of the stories that my dad would tell at the dinner table growing up. And those were the stories that I ended up, like, that still kind of, I don't know, were just hardwired into my brain and still, like, loomed large for me. And those were the ones I wrote about.
And Mary and Joseph, you wouldn't have necessarily grown up with in Bible class, but did that still, it's a story everyone's pretty familiar with?
Yeah. And I felt like that was a good point to end on, like, that it was very, like, it was forward-looking to something new. And because in the book, like, all the characters are sort of populated by a certain kind of character, a certain kind of, dare I say, sort of neurotic, I don't know, I guess I sort of, like, was projecting my own picadillos, issues, or whatever, onto these stoic characters to sort of make them understandable to me and make them sort of, like, I don't know, like they became like people that I know. And in the last story, I don't know, it just sort of points towards something new, you know, which I thought was a nice place to end.
And doing the research, was there anything you discovered that was totally new, apart from you know, about any of these stories that hadn't come through in the way they were taught to you, but suddenly became clear, that gave you a window into the characters?
That's a good question. I think it was just more like kind of like spending more time with them and like rereading them and trying to make, like, for instance, like the story of Samson and Delilah, I really feel like it defied any kind of moral lesson. Like, what is the moral? And in kind of like, you know, living with it for a while and like rethinking it, it just sort of seemed like it was a story about love, like how love can just make you so crazy and fill you with so much like denial, and it can be self-obliterating when it's unhealthy. And that was something that I think I missed as a kid. It just seemed like a story of great strength and slaying stuff with the jawbone of an ass.
I always thought he was a lot like Thor in the Marvel comics.
Yeah,
this sort of image of him. Now, for those that have not yet read the book, you want to tell us a little bit about the Samson as we all remember him, and Samson as he is in the book? What's the,
I'm not sure how. Well, he's like this guy who has issues, like father issues. He's sort of like working out these issues with slaying and smiting, envisioning his dad, you know, as he's like roundhouse kicking people to the genitals and swinging around people by the beards and stuff like that. In my version also he has a best friend named Jason. I don't know. Oh, and also like when they shave his head, and like he's been blinded, all kinds of horrible things, and just to add insult to injury, when his hair is cut and he's brought before the Philistines, the king looks at him and says, you know, with your new short haircut, it really makes your face look fat.
Now, you've got a day job where you get to bring a lot of creativity to the table. I'm curious if it's, what's the difference between the writing you do for WireTap and the writing you do for the book?
Well, some of these stories, a good portion of them, were written initially for radio broadcast for This American Life to conform to themes that they were working on for the radio show. When writing for the radio, you have to kind of, or for the kind of radio that This American Life does, like literally there is a formula that it breaks down into where a new kind of enigma has to be presented to move the story along every 45 seconds. You have to write in very kind of image-laden language, the belief being that radio is a very visual medium, and you got to keep the jokes coming, and because you have to, you know that people are listening to this while, you know, making casserole and plunging toilets, and not at the same time. And but the nice thing about writing for the page, like with radio, you're taking someone by the hand and you're leading them through the dark. So you have to take great care with that. And with writing for the page, there's more digressions. You can get into more details. You can sort of riff a little bit more, and that's really fun.
And how this is your second book, how did it compare with the process of the first?
Boy, oh boy. Well, I think like because a lot of these stories were written for the radio, I tried to cast the net, like I guess I was using a different part of my brain. Like the first book that I wrote, I had written 2 books before that, and they sat in drawers, and I thought this was another one that's going to sit in a drawer. And so the language of it was a lot more private, and there's purity in that. Like I had no expectation about anything coming of this book. And so, yeah, so there's purity in that. But at the same time also, knowing that you're writing stories, so yeah, in comparison, knowing that you're writing stories for the radio that many people are going to be listening to, bestows a certain kind of, I don't know, responsibility, you know? A feeling that you don't want to exclude, you don't want it to be too inside, you want everybody to sort of follow along with you, and so in that way, yeah, you just end up using a different part of your brain, I guess. Like I describe it as the kind of writing that takes place with a coffee as opposed to the writing that takes place with a glass of beer.